In this video, I'm going to show you how to use an LLM like Gemini to localize a document with AI. Selecting languages that you want to go from. So this document's in English. We're going to go to, let's say, German, save those languages, and not just strictly translate, but prompt the LLM to localize the content as a local would, ideally. And of course, you can modify the prompt as you wish. It'll copy the document, the Google Doc, as it is laid out. So with list elements and headings, it'll actually copy those over in the new language of choice. So I don't speak any other language. So one way that I thought was clever would be to take English, convert it into Spanish, which is something, I mean, I took 5 years of Spanish in school, so I am fluent. I'm kidding, I'm an American, so I only speak English, which is unfortunate. I translated that Spanish into Korean. This was using Google Translate. They have a really helpful function formula within Sheets. And then I converted it back to English using an LLM. And I was looking at the character length to see what the loss was maybe, and looking at pretty consistently the difference between the original and after translating it a couple of times. There was a loss. In this case, it was 74 characters, 56 characters, 100 characters. In one scenario, it actually returned more content and pretty good. I mean, this granted was basically Google Translate twice and then using an LLM to bring it back to English. So let's see, back over here, the localized document finished. And if we refresh this, we should see it in another language. And everything seems to be, retained in the document. I have a client recently who told me that they were translating their entire site into other languages using AI. And so I thought this would be a helpful project to build. I also was testing, I found this Hugging Face model that Facebook put out. And they have text-to-text translation. And of course, I thought, let's get fancy. I spun up a Google Colab notebook. And I actually found this, and maybe there's something I'm missing here. Maybe it's just pre-trained and we need to train it even further. Or maybe I made a mistake. But when I did run a test translation, it actually changed the year from 1821 to 1841, which was concerning, as well as some other factual data here. It also turned the Battle of the Alamo into the Battle of San Antonio. So in this project, I actually used Gemini's new 2.0 API, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And if you want to just, get up off the ground running here, I will link to my GitHub account where this code is, and now I'll just show you how to get up and running just really quickly. So I'm going to copy that code and I'm going to create a new blank Google Doc. And let's have Gemini help write something. The workforce. So I'm going to create that. And in the meantime, you're going to need an API key. So in Google's AI Studio, I'm going to create a new API key. You got to select a Google Cloud project. So you have to make sure that that's something you have set up as well. And I'm going to copy that key and back over in the new document. Let's see how that's going. Okay. Gemini generated a nice document. Let's just say that you have a blog post on this topic or any other, and go to extensions, app script. I'm just going to quickly save let API key equal what we just got from this AI Studio. And again, I'm going to copy this code, and now I'm going to paste that in. Okay, and now you're going to just take this API key and replace where it says your Gemini API key. Okay, now save that. You also need to add an HTML, which we'll call sidebar. Go back to the GitHub and you'll see this sidebar.html. You can Command A to highlight all of that within this code block, and Command V to paste that in. Save that document. Okay, now if we refresh over here, you'll see the onOpen function will trigger, and then we can select the languages. You'll need to approve it first if you trust me, which hopefully you do. So English to French, let's say, save those languages. Okay, now that the languages are set, you can go to Localize, And in the code you may have seen, we'll just quickly go back over here, and you'll notice the prompt is, can you localize the following source language text into the target language and only return the most likely single translation as a response with no additional context, because sometimes the LLM will just bring you like, oh, here are some options. So being explicit there could be helpful. So that's still running. Okay, that ran. So that is in French. And the entire document, the image was brought over. So let's get into how to build this. So in a new document, let's just maybe copy some text from here. So we have something to work with. Go to extensions, app script. And the first function we're going to write is going to be called translate and copy document. Okay, so if, the translate and copy document, let's just say const source doc will be equal to document app dot open by ID. Let's just say get active document. Const source body will be source doc dot get body. And then we're going to say target doc is going to be equal to drive app dot get file by ID source doc dot get ID make copy. Const target doc ID is equal to target doc dot get ID, and target body is equal to document app dot open by ID target doc ID dot get body. And let's just start with translating the title, which will take, we're going to pass in to a function called translate text, which we'll write in a second. That will take 3 parameters: the title, which we will get, let's just say const source title is equal to source doc dot get name. For now, we'll just say English to Spanish. We'll hard code those values for the time being. And then we'll say target doc dot set name equal to translated title. And then let's say return target doc ID. All right, now we need to write the translate text function, which again it'll take in some text, source language, we'll say sourceLang, target lang. Within here, we're gonna have a try and catch block, which we will catch an error, and we'll just log that error to the console, and otherwise we'll return just the text in its original form if we don't get anything there. We're gonna say let localization equal, and now we're gonna pass it into the Gemini API. That's a function we're gonna write here in a second. Again, we take in the same parameters, and that's just helpful for organization. We should return, so we'll return the localization. And I actually wrote this function in a previous video, so hopefully you've been following along. I won't write this again from scratch just for the sake of time, but to go through it, function will take in text, the source language, the target language. The naming conventions don't matter as long as you reference them accurately within the function, just FYI. So that's why they look different than I previously just wrote. We will update that API key. Save that. And you'll notice this is the difference here, is that I did update the model to be the Gemini 2.0 Flash Lite preview. It still has the generate content flag, and you take in your API key. Again, the prompt is here. I can put that in the description just so you know, and we pass in the text as the final parameter, pass it to a post endpoint, which is this URL that we construct here. We stringify the payload, and then we parse it to get really the part that we want, and we return. Okay, I think we're ready to, so the translate and copy document function is selected here, so that's good. I'm gonna rename this project text to text localization with LLM. Let's throw acronyms at the wall. I'm gonna run Command R to run this function. review permissions, select all. Okay, that finished running. I'm gonna refresh this and actually, okay, so it did make a copy and translated the title in Spanish. So the text is in English, the post itself, but the title is in Spanish, and that's what we are wanting to make sure we're getting up to this point. Amazing. Now let's get the entire body and update that. So we're gonna write a function called translate content. That's gonna take in a few parameters again: source element, target element, source language, target language. And this will allow us to parse through the document, look for like, is it a heading? Is it a paragraph text? Is it a list element? And handle those situations. So we'll say const source type is equal to the source element that we passed through dot get type. And we're gonna create a switch statement for each source type. So for the case of document app element type paragraph, and similarly, I'll just copy that for text. We'll say source text is equal to source element dot get text. If the source text is present and not null, we'll say translated text is equal to translate text. We're going to call that function. We'll pass in the source text, the source language, which we'll save and retrieve in a second, target language, and then if target element dot get type is equal to document app dot element type paragraph, and we'll say target element dot set text is equal to translated text. Else if, we'll say else if pretty similarly here, but text target element dot insert text at the 0th offset and the translated text. So there's just two ways of handling that. I'm going to copy and paste in the other switch statements so I can get that and then talk through them. Now we have a list element case where it gets the items. It'll clear the paragraph content because I was running into an issue where it would put the translated version followed by the English. So this is how I handled that. It brings the images over and headings, etc. So we just have the title being updated now. We'll also say translate content, source body, target body, source language, target language. I'm also going to say source language and target language here. And now we'll pass in the source doc ID as well as the source language and the target language, so that we'll, instead of getting the active document, which we will later, just abstracting some of this complexity into other functions and makes it a little easy. We're also going to say let folder ID equal get parent folder source doc ID. And this will be helpful for putting the copy of the document in the current folder. Again, I've written this function in a few videos, so I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm just going to copy and paste it in down here so that we'll pass in the source document that we're leveraging. We'll get that file, we'll get the parents of the file, and if that has a next, then we'll get the ID of the folder essentially that the file is in, and then we'll add the new document to that file, to that folder. We'll make a copy and then we'll say move to drive app.give folder by ID, folder ID. Okay, we'll save that. And now I'm going to create another function, which function run translate. We'll say for now, source language is equal to, let's just say American English, because we're using an LLM, so we can feed in natural language, not like a language code, such as EN for English or ES for Spanish. Source doc ID is equal to what we just get active document dot get ID. And we'll say localized doc ID is equal to translate and copy document, source doc ID, source language, and target language. And now we can say document, well, let's just log it out, localized doc ID. All right, let's select run translate in AppScript, Command R to run that. All right, it returned a doc ID. Let's take a look. It looks like it's in Spanish, so that's fantastic. One thing worth noting, and it might not have come up here because it's within the realm of limitations. So I'm using the Gemini 2.0 flashlight. Oh, maybe it's this one. Anyway, the rate limit per minute is between 2 and 30 based on what I'm seeing here. And so I think each time we call that Gemini API, that's one rate per limit. So one function call per minute. Sorry. So one thing that I've done is I've wrote some code to break that up if needed. To handle that, let's say const properties equals property service dot get script properties, and we're going to say let call count equal properties dot get property call count, or we'll set it to 0. Similarly, we're going to create a last call time, which will be helpful for understanding, like, do we need to reset the rate limit? Now equals date dot now, const minute in milliseconds is 60 times 1000. And so if now minus last call time is greater than or equal to a minute, we'll set call count equal to 0. Last call time is equal to now, and then we'll say properties dot set property call count. We'll set that property to call count. Similarly, we'll say last call time, copy that, and replace that. Okay, so if call count is greater than or equal to 30, which is what we just looked at in the documentation. So based on the rate limit that you run into, you can update that number. Const time to wait is equal to minute minus now minus last call time. So we need to set that that wait. We'll say utilities.sleep time to wait. We'll set, and then once that's done, we'll set the call count back to 0 and the last call time equal to date.now. And again, we'll set the properties. And then otherwise, we'll just run through that try function. Let's say each time that happens, call count plus plus and properties dot set property, again, call count, and we'll just put another if localization dot length greater than 0, we'll turn it. Else we'll say we'll log a translation error. Okay, and now we'll just some helpful functions, copy and paste them in for the sake of time. And I'll explain them. So the onOpen is a trigger that Google AppScript exposes so that once we open a Google Doc, in this case, we're saying Google Doc, our document app, get the UI, and then create a menu. We're going to say localized document with AI as the title of that menu. We're adding steps, select languages to show a sidebar, which we'll add in a second. And that's an HTML file. And then the second step is to localize, and we call the run translate function that we wrote earlier. For the first step, we're going to show a sidebar. We're going to use the HTML service to create HTML output from file, and the file we're going to add right now is titled sidebar. And in this file, we're basically getting the drop-down menus for the user to select their languages of the source language. It'll default to English, but you can select these languages. You can add more in this file if you want to expand the possibilities here. I might update them and I'll push that change to GitHub. And currently I just have a few examples to play around with. You'll notice that the Save Languages button calls a script that would save the sourceLang and targetLang to the file before we run. And I actually put on a success handler, essentially, of like a message to the user saying, success, you've updated to these languages. So that's helpful there. And I've added the get languages and the set languages, which basically just, again, uses the property service to get and set those properties. Let's go ahead, go back to this document and refresh to ideally have the doc app trigger that function. Let's just make sure everything works. We're going to authorize your account, allow. I'm going to select, let's do Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. Obrigado. I'm so sorry for everyone out there. Okay, so that worked, and let's localize. We'll see, might throw an error. We can debug it together. Fun times. Well, that worked. All right, there we go. I know that Google has this translate document using the Google Translate function, which could be helpful if you just want a basic translation. Hopefully this takes it a step further and brings the LLM to life with some localization. I could see there being other ways of improving this, where maybe you say, this is the keyword we're targeting. Can you also optimize for a similar keyword based on your localization or your local knowledge of Spanish in Mexico? I hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comment section below if you run into any issues or if you have requests for a future video. I'd love to start taking some requests and build what you actually want and what would be helpful for you. Please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more Automaway so I can help you get these repetitive tasks out of your way. Millie says we're done.